This is the Brave Ideas Podcast, brought to you by Aqua. Welcome to the Brave Ideas Podcast, the show that is all about bringing to light fresh perspectives from the worlds of digital and marketing. I'm Dan Herman. I'm a digital strategist, a Tottenham Hotspur fan, and a tenor in an all-male choir. And I'm here today with my co-host.
I'm Sinead. I'm also a digital strategist here at Aqua and a wannabe Disney princess. Before we start the show, I just wanted to say that we would love to hear your opinion about our show. So please email us at braveideas@aquaonline.com, or you can follow us on social media, and that's at Aqua Agency on both Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, or Brave Ideas Podcast on Instagram.
Today we're talking to Tessa Davel, copywriter at Aqua. Tessa is a cat fundraiser and the spice to Sinead's sugar, and she's going to talk to us about content. Tess, what's new?
Hi, Dan and Sugar.
Hi, Spice.
Sure, we should start our own band.
We sound like the Spice Girls.
I
Anyway.
know. I'm here to talk about content shock and why brands need to be bold in their messaging.
Okay, so for all of us, what is content shock exactly?
Simply put, content shock is the overwhelming amount of information that we receive on a daily basis. That's not a new concept. We all know you're sitting in front of your computer and you're just bombarded constantly with adverts and messaging and targeted things. I think one of the factors in 2020, web-based content is expected to increase by 600%. So everything we're seeing now is going to go up by 600%, which is just ridiculous.
I know exactly actually what you're talking about. Like even if you set out with a specific goal in mind, like if you're trying to find a holiday package that's suited to you, and you do some research, you're so overwhelmed within half an hour with all the amount of content that you're fed that you can't really actually make up a decent decision, and you can't make up your mind about anything.
And also, I mean, just to add to that, my response to content shock is to run away. Like, what content shock does for me and what the overwhelming amount of content does for me is actually require me to almost get off social media and to get off all these platforms that are throwing so much information at me, because it's actually overwhelming. You get confronted with so much negativity and so much this, whether it's check what this guy did to that guy in a car accident or whatever. There's just so much information and a lot of negative information out there that it actually is upsetting. So What do you think brands need to do to get around that?
Well, there is a threshold as to how much attention you can give the negativity or just the ads, even if they are a positive ad. There's too much and we can't take it all in. Brands need to find a way to target us that works. So they need to find either a niche that hasn't been found, which is difficult, or they just need to be more bold in their messaging. They need to step away from their box, their CI, and step out of that and actually just go, let's just try this. Let's just do this. Let's see how it works.
So one thing that I do want to say, and again, Dan's going to roll his eyes at me when I say this, I love Google+. And I know that it's been scrapped for a spare part, and I know that it doesn't work, but I was one of the few people who really, really did believe in Google+ and think it was great. And I think that why I thought it was so fantastic is exactly something that you're saying, is that because I could find very niche content that was suited to what I wanted to see. So, for example, I used to follow Yuppie Chef on Google+, and I could not just belong to Yuppie Chef, so I didn't have to follow just the generic Yuppie Chef feed. I could actually go in and follow something which is called the community, which was pets in our packaging. So the only content from Yuppie Chef that I signed up for was when people posted pictures of their pets in Yuppie Chef packaging. So it's very niche and it's very specific. I know that it didn't work because it was kind of advertised as a social networking stream, which it wasn't. But I think that is where content needs to go, to that amount of personalization.
So, I mean, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, you're advocating that people should dress up in Yuppie Chef boxes. I'm just like,
She would be so happy if we could dress the cats up.
But I think it's it's really fascinating also. I mean, just to your point around what you're saying around people wanting to personally curate the content that they consume.
Yes.
And the fact that content needs to be really strongly personalized, and which only really proves Tessa's points around how difficult it is if you're going in with the same old approach to delivering the content. And what's really interesting about what Tess mentioned earlier is around bold messaging and really trying to break through to your consumers with messages that jar them or disrupt them in their day-to-day. So I'd be quite interested to hear from you what examples you have of content experiences that do sort of push consumers out of their comfort zone.
So Sinead's actually right. Personalization is the way forward, but that's not always entirely possible, especially with like above the line stuff. Not that we're worried about that because we're digital. But Nando's is a great example of how being bold works. They have, yes, they know their target audience and they have great adverts because of the humor factor, and it always works. They're very tongue-in-cheek and it's fantastic. And that works across most media platforms.
Well, Nando's do really push the boundaries from a political perspective, definitely, and they often make jokes about famous South African personalities like Malebo. And what's really nice about that is very real-time, right? Really topical and really quick. And it's digital, which means they can put it on and off. I mean, I know that Nando's have a very big legal team that carefully monitors everything that they do. But what's alarming for me is that you almost need to, like some brands feel like they almost need to break the law and break the norms of marketing in order to get their message across. So you often hear of campaigns that companies do. They flight an ad and then they pull that ad, that ad gets escalated to the Broadcast Complaints Commission, and then they pull that ad off the internet and off the television, and what they've got then is all this earned media publicity around the ad. So I'd be quite interested to hear your take on whether that's acceptable.
Well, there is that old adage, no publicity is bad publicity. It's not entirely true. If a brand is doing that and they're ready for it and they're prepared for the negative impact that it could have because they've done it intentionally, yes, it's sneaky, it's underhanded, it's not great. If it happens, if they're being bold and it happens and they're not ready for it, it could really sink a brand. So being prepared is obviously key, but being bold is never going to be wrong entirely. You have to push the boundaries just to try, even if it's once.
I was going to say it reminded me of a conversation that we did have in a previous podcast where we were talking about the importance of a brand just having a standpoint. And I think we debated that for quite a while. Like, how do you know whether you're pushing the boundaries of being too controversial? And I think the takeout there was just try it, just, have an opinion and go from there.
I mean, it's really interesting, and I think that it's about having an opinion, but it's also about trying new things and being different. And I think that we can't stress how important that thing is. So there's so many different platforms out there, and we mentioned earlier about how people are switching off, leaving social media platforms. That's one of the undesirable effects of content shock, is that actually your Facebook audience may be less than what you think it is because of the abundance of content that's there, or your Twitter audience may be less. But all that means is that people move to the next best alternative. So if that's about reading long-form content and engaging with that on platforms like LinkedIn, or on Medium, or on Quartz, and even now even Tumblr moving toward that space. Or if it's about engaging with snaps on Snapchat and following the stories of brands who create those things. It's really about trying new forms of content and experimenting with it. And that can also be brave. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be politically edgy and socially challenging and controversial in order to be bold and be brave. But so what I'm saying is that it's not simply about the messaging, but also about the mode of that in which the message is communicated as a form of defining what being actually brave with content means. I'm not sure what you think about that, Sinead.
Well, I was just going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more about Snapchat, because I know that you're a big advocate for Snapchat, and why you think it works so well.
So Snapchat, I mean, I'm sure you'll know, has been in the news. There's been obviously some...
Dan, why are you such a big fan of Snapchat?
Well, I don't engage with it for that purposes, but there was a big controversy when it first started around how teenagers, what they were doing, where they were sending illicit photos of themselves to other teenagers in high schools, and that wasn't really cool. I mean, Tessa's got a word for it. What's your word?
Sexting.
Yeah, sexting.
It's not really sexting because it's images,
it's
but
sex
yeah.
snapping.
Yeah, sex snapping.
But basically, I think what Snapchat has become is that, unlike a lot of fads, what it's done is consistently grown to the point where it is a very exciting and large medium. In fact, what WPP, which is the mother company that IACWA have done, is they've actually started an agency called Truffle Pig that partners with Snapchat directly as well as the Daily Mail, to have a native advertising platform on Snapchat, because they see this as a massive opportunity. So what brands are doing, brave brands in America and globally are doing, is that they're opening Snapchat accounts, they're creating stories, and they're distributing this content. And what a story is basically a piece of content that disappears after 24 hours. So it's an additional functionality in addition to the snap that lasts for 10 seconds. But what I find infuriating is that it is something that teens in South Africa are doing. There's no hard numbers. The report hasn't been released to say that Snapchat has X million of followers in South Africa. But it's a new technology. It's there. It's a new platform. It's a new means of content. Why aren't brands brave enough to experiment with content on their platform? To try. I mean, what do you think?
They've still kind of put us into boxes in a way, brands. Being they, all those people. So they've classified the millennials, 18 to 34-year-olds. I don't personally think I'm one, but so they say, okay, they like the short, sharp bursts of media, and we must use this all the time, and this is what will work, and quick information, go, stats and figures and listicles, which is where you list, like BuzzFeed, for example, where you list things 1 to 10 or 12 ways to get great skin and all those things. Snapchat their advertising has become bold in certain brands have. Like, for example, Lynx did a great campaign where Snapchat had the means to measure whether a certain snap was, pushing the boundaries a bit, and Lynx would pop up with an ad that said, how about you clean up and take a cold shower? And obviously they were advertising shower gel. So that's great. And I would kill myself laughing if that came up. Yeah.
But it's very disruptive. What these platforms allow you to do is to speak in people in the language that they sort of understand. So, I think we've had a great conversation. And Tess, I'd like to know if there was one thing that you could sum up from this conversation for Aqua as well as the broader industry, what would it be?
Be bold. That's really it. Just try something. If it goes wrong, manage it. That's why you have teams that can help you with that kind of stuff, PR teams. But yeah, just try a new message. Just explore your content, explore your audience. Don't just stick to the norm and stick to what you think they want. Do something different.
Awesome. Tess, if people want to find out a little bit more about this topic and they want to get hold of you, how do they do that?
On my email address, it's tessadad@aquaonline.com, or you can follow me on Instagram, tkd2685.
Great. Thanks, Tess. Now let's move on to the tool of the week.
Thanks, Dan. So I'm going to be talking about something called EmojiTracker.com. But first I want to give a little bit of a background. I love emojis, so no one judge me. When I first got an iPhone and I had an emoji-enabled keyboard, I was very excited. I created this game with my friends where I would try and get them to guess the movie based on emojis. I also sat and created the entire Pulp Fiction plot in emojis that I know I've sent around to everyone, including both Tessa and Dan.
It was the French hamburger that gave it away.
So 2 things happened this week that I was really excited about. First of all, Dan showed me something called Emojimo, which is an additional keyboard that you can plug into your iPhone keyboards. And what that does is it converts your text to emojis as you type, which kind of blew my mind. But the second one is EmojiTracker.com, and it's an experiment in real time, and it tracks emojis that are used on Twitter and that are trending on Twitter. It was launched around about the 4th of July, just after Independence Day, where things like fireworks and the hamburger emoji and the American flag were doing really, really well and trending on that day. And so it's an aggregation of all the emojis used on Twitter. It's displayed like a periodic table. You can click on any one of the emojis that are trending, and it opens up a little sneak peek into some of the conversations that are happening around that particular emoji. And what it really, really is nice for, in my opinion, is sentiment perspective and conversation listening. But when I did do some research about it, it was created more specifically for tech people. The project has open source code, so you can view how they've aggregated what's going on behind the scenes. So that, again, is EmojiTracker.com. So check it out.
Thanks, Sinead, and thank you for listening to the Brave Ideas podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher, And while you're there, give us a rating and a review. We would really appreciate your support. You can also visit aquagrp.libsyn.com for the complete library of episodes. If you want to keep in touch with me, Dan, you can follow me at elhermo on Twitter and elhermo23 on Snapchat and Instagram. And you can follow Sinead.
You can follow Sinead, but before I say that, of course, he's on Snapchat. So I think we're hoping to see your Snapchat following grow and increase a little bit more after this conversation. So that's elhermo23 on Snapchat. And if you want to follow me, it's Feeling Disco, and that's Feeling Disco with a K on both Twitter and Instagram.
Special thanks to Sinead for that big Snapchat shout out. But a more special thank you to Tessa Davel, our special guest. Thanks to Matthew Klawansky for music and production. Thanks to Eros Gous and his team for the art direction. And thank you to JP Singh for managing our social media.
That brings us to the end of the show, and as usual, we'll leave you with one final thought. There are no original ideas, only original people.